This case took place in Chile in 1987 during the dictatorship of General Augusto Pinochet, when more than 180 poor families were violently displaced by the authorities from their community in the province of Iquique and relocated to the Alto Hospicio sector in northern Chile. Alto Hospicio was a dusty, desolate piece of land in the middle of the desert, also in the Iquique area. In this settlement, there was no electricity, no drinking water, and not even a sewage system. There were no public offices, schools, or hospitals, and the area lacked all urban infrastructure. Because there were no proper roads, garbage trucks could not reach the settlement either, resulting in massive piles of waste that were nearly impossible to clear. This worsened the already harsh living conditions of the people. More than 30 years later, the city still stands in the desert, with more than 120,000 people now living there. The area is still developing, with small businesses, several schools, a hospital, and a police station now in place. But the standard of living remains very low. A study on urban conditions and infrastructure conducted in 2014 ranked the city last in the nation for quality of life. Unbearable heat during the day, equally unbearable cold at night, poverty, rising unemployment, and homes made of low quality, flimsy materials create extremely harsh conditions for normal life. As a result, many residents dream of leaving Alto Hospicio, but without enough savings, it is difficult to move away. Most people struggle daily for survival in extreme poverty. Several times a week, utility companies deliver clean drinking water, which is urgently needed in the poorest parts of the city. From these neighborhoods leave their homes early in the morning with containers, standing in long lines to collect water, while the men spend their days working in the mines or collecting garbage for a pittance. In other words, life in Alto Hospicio is extremely difficult. At the beginning of 2001, a series of mysterious disappearances in the city attracted national media attention. Some government officials faced public outrage and concern. The tragic events surrounding the disappearance of the victims left a devastating and shameful mark on the history of the Chilean police. The indifference and disdain with which the authorities and law enforcement treated the victims' families reflected the class prejudice that existed in certain parts of society at the time. It all began in mid-September of 1998, when several regional newspapers reported that police had found the body of a girl on a beach near the Iquique area. The victim was 17-year-old Graciela Montserrat Saravia. The police had been alerted by fishermen who were out with their boats a few dozen meters from the shore. The men claimed they had seen a parked white car and a couple arguing, but they were too far away to see the faces of those involved, and decided not to intervene, thinking the situation would not escalate into murder. In fact, the young girl had been struck multiple times in the face with a rock, killing her. Her body and legs bore multiple bruises, indicating that the attacker had dragged her along the ground before and after the murder. While the country was preparing for national holidays, this mysterious crime was quickly overshadowed, and no suspect was found. On November 24, 1999, a year after Graciela's murder, a 14-year-old girl named Macarena Sanchez mysteriously disappeared. She left home early in the morning to go to school, but she never arrived. The police response to her parents' appeal was highly unusual. They suggested that many young girls in Iquique offered intimate services for money and that Macarena might have run away from home to support herself in that way. Authorities advised the parents in a few days, assuming their daughter would eventually return home. However, as the days, weeks, and months passed, hope of finding the girl alive faded. The authorities did not bother to conduct a serious investigation, wrongfully assuming that she had voluntarily left home. On February 21st, 2000, another girl named Sarah Gomez was reported missing. A month later, on March 23rd, 14-year-old Laura Sola disappeared on her way to school and never returned home. On April 5th of the same year, Catherine Arkes was reported missing after she failed to return home. Gradually, teenage girls began to vanish without a trace. There were no witnesses, no suspects, and the police's only response was that they had all left home in search of a better life. The authorities' tactlessness and inaction were staggering, forcing the parents of the missing girls to take to the streets in search of answers. Due to a lack of well-paying jobs or simply because of family problems, many young people left home in search of financial opportunity, and some found illegal means as the quickest way out of poverty. This was, at least, the reasoning of local authorities. Rumors circulated that some of the girls who had left home had been transported to Bolivia and enslaved, but this remains speculation. On May 22nd, another girl, 17-year-old Patricia Palma, disappeared on her way home from school. She became the sixth victim in a series of recent disappearances. 11 days later, Macarena Montesinos disappeared. Viviana Garay, another victim, then vanished as well. However, her father was not left in the dark. Some months earlier, Orlando Garay, Viviana's father, had read a flyer seeking information about another missing girl, Catherine Arce. A few days before Viviana's disappearance, she had shown him that same flyer and posted it on a lamppost near their home. Garay discovered that Viviana and Catherine had attended the same school and that several other girls had disappeared under similar circumstances. He then decided to organize the relatives of the missing girls to pressure the authorities into carrying out a proper investigation. Orlando's rebellious spirit helped him and the other parents overcome their despair. The possibility that a whole network of kidnappers and traffickers was operating in the city deeply worried the locals, while the authorities did their best to calm the public. Under Orlando's leadership, volunteers formed small search teams and began combing the area for clues. They visited nearby villages, distributed flyers with photos of the missing girls, and expanded their search after using up their last savings. Unfortunately, all their efforts were in vain. Weeks later, during another search in remote areas, the first clues were found. On June 18, 2000, a school uniform and a backpack were discovered at a garbage dump relatively close to the city. These items belonged to Viviana Garay. A few hours later, personal belongings of Catherine Arce were found at another dump. Some of the recovered clothes were stained with blood. In the following months, the actions of the missing girl's parents gained widespread media attention. One of the most chilling and heartbreaking images came when the grandmother of one of the missing girls found her granddaughter's underwear at a garbage dump. Her cries of disbelief reflected the pain of all the parents who had still not found their daughters. With the girls' belongings in hand, the relatives organized small marches, which gradually drew media attention to their plight. For the first time, the case and its strange circumstances became public. All the girls had disappeared either on their way to school or on their way home from school. The parents were unanimous in their belief that their daughters had not run away from home, and that something terrible had happened to them. They were all conscientious students from modest but respectable roots with strong values. In other words, these disappearances deserved serious attention and a proper investigation by the authorities. Over time, public pressure grew, and the demonstrations organized by the relatives of the missing girls attracted more supporters and concerned citizens. Orlando Garay continued to pressure the authorities and even secured an audience with then Chilean President Ricardo Lagos, who was on a business trip to Iquique. The president agreed to give the desperate parents some of his time, but he remained cold and unsympathetic. He assured them that the police were doing their best to find the girls, but that, for now, they needed to be patient. With that, the president ended the meeting and left, unwilling to listen to the parents' accusations against the police. Later, Lagos told reporters that he believed the investigation was the most thorough the country had ever seen. He also assured them that he was willing to meet with the parents of the missing girls again if they had any new facts that could influence the investigation. In other words, he shifted the responsibility for gathering evidence onto the parents. Many public figures, whether politicians or celebrities, commented on the case. The well-known psychiatrist Maria Luisa Cordero visited the city in September of 2001 in connection with her participation in a psychiatric congress. When asked about the case, she said that the families of the missing girls should forgive her, but that she was sure the girls had left home in search of a better economic future. She believed the poor living conditions had driven them to leave. Cordero made this statement before the girls' bodies were recovered from abandoned mines and garbage dumps. On October 3, 2001, events occurred that changed the course of the investigation. A local egg supplier was driving his truck along the road connecting Iquique to Route 5 when, around noon, he saw a girl walking alone by the roadside. She appeared thin, dirty, and confused. The man did not hesitate to stop and ask if she was okay. The 13-year-old girl explained that a man had abused her, thrown her into a deep shaft, and tied her hands. She said she had lost consciousness during the fall, but managed to free her hands when she woke up and made her way to the surface. She then walked to the road to seek help. The girl was taken to the police station and then to the regional hospital. An initial medical examination revealed that she had suffered a skull fracture, a broken collarbone, chest bruises, a cut on the front of her head, and a concussion. It was confirmed that she had been a victim of violence. The attending physician was deeply concerned for the girl and urged her to share everything that had happened to her. The girl's name was Barbara, and during police questioning, she recounted how a man posing as a taxi driver had offered to drive her to school early in the morning. Barbara agreed, but once she was in the car, she realized she had made a mistake. At some point, the attacker pulled out a knife and ordered her to sit still, or he would kill her. He then drove her to an abandoned mine in the middle of the desert, where he committed the heinous act. They both got out of the car, and the man forced Barbara to kneel in front of the mine shaft. He told her that he had killed people like her before. Barbara was terrified, begging him to let her go and trying to calm him down. but the man ignored her pleas. After a while, he pushed her into the mine shaft and started throwing heavy rocks at her. Several struck her head, and she lost consciousness. It could be said that Barbara was lucky, as she landed on the ledge of a cliff about 10 meters down. Otherwise, she would have fallen to the bottom of the 200-meter-deep mine and died instantly. When she woke up, she found herself unable to move because of the rocks the murderer had thrown onto her. Barbara waited a few minutes before standing up and trying to free herself. She had lost a lot of blood, her head was badly injured, and she fainted several times along the way, but she survived and walked 4 kilometers to seek help. The next day, Barbara's mother filed a complaint for kidnapping, rape, and attempted murder. As a result, the police launched an operation to arrest the suspect. There were suspicions that the attacker was not only a rapist, but also a serial killer. None of the police officers involved in the operation had experience with such cases, as serial killers were extremely rare in Chile. They had to rely on the testimony of the girl who had miraculously survived. Barbara provided details that would prove crucial in catching the perpetrator. She described the man as middle-aged, with black-dyed hair, driving a white car and wearing a shirt with the municipality's logo. She also remembered that 2 small stuffed animals from the children's television show, Bananas in Pajamas, were hanging from the rearview mirror. The following morning, police officers at a checkpoint stopped a white vehicle. The description of the suspected rapist and murderer had already distributed to all officers in the area. The patrol officer asked the driver to get out of the car and noticed the same banana figures hanging from the mirror. The driver, 37-year-old Julio Segundo Perez Silva, did not appear nervous. The officers informed him that he needed to come to the police station because of an issue with his license plate. Perez Silva willingly agreed, making no attempt to flee or explain himself. However, once at the station, his confidence vanished when he learned that he had been arrested for an alleged rape committed the previous day. Barbara recognized the suspect in a video provided by the police, filmed while he was in his cell. She also identified his white Mazda Capella, the Bananas in Pajamas figures, and the homemade knife he had used to threaten her. Within hours, Perez Silva underwent hair, semen, and blood tests, as well as psychological evaluations, and his fingerprints were taken. Under pressure from the authorities, the accused admitted to having had consensual relations with Barbara, which was itself a serious crime given that she was a minor. However, he denied attempting to kill her or being involved in the disappearances and murders of the other girls. Meanwhile, police searched Perez Silva's house, where he lived with his partner, Nancy Borro, and her daughters. The family was shocked when the police arrived. During the search, a shirt with the municipality's logo, previously described by Barbara in her statement, was found. Julio Perez Silva had been in custody for just 24 hours when the news of his arrest hit the front pages of all the local newspapers. The police hurried to inform President Ricardo Lagos that a suspect had been arrested in connection with the missing girls and that he might be a serial killer. This could have meant that all the public claims by the authorities suggesting that the missing girls had run away to engage in illegal activities were false, exposing the incompetence of those handling the case. The police continued to pressure Perez Silva, hoping for a confession as soon as possible. However, he refused to take the blame. The extreme measures taken by the officers to obtain a confession were, to say the least, controversial. The prisoner was denied food, water, and sleep for 3 days. After a harsh interrogation on Sunday, October 7th, Perez Silva finally confessed to killing 3 underage girls and dumping their bodies at the bottom of an abandoned mine. Shortly afterward, he admitted to more victims, stating that some of the bodies were buried in various garbage dumps. The police tried to conduct their investigation in secret, but information quickly leaked to several national newspapers. The first bodies were found on Tuesday, October 9th, at small garbage dumps around Iquique. Later, Perez Silva himself pointed out where he had hidden some of the victims' remains. After the discovery of the first 4 victims, it was decided that their bodies would be sent immediately to the forensic service, as the remains were already in an advanced state of decomposition, making identification difficult. On October 11th, the parents of the missing girls were summoned to the forensic service to identify the remains. Most of the bodies were identified shortly afterward. The public reaction was swift, and the case shocked the entire nation. Social pressure on law enforcement grew, and it became clear that many of these cases had not even been properly registered in the system. Meanwhile, officers began blaming each other and trying to avoid responsibility, which led to the resignation of several high-ranking officials. The case revealed the shortcomings of various government agencies and triggered a political earthquake. For weeks, the news of the serial killer's arrest dominated the front pages of the media. Chile had not seen a serial murder case since 1982, when 2 police officers known as the psychopaths of Viña del Mar killed 10 people. The funeral of the victims of the so-called psychopath of Alto Hospicio took place on October 15th at the Cathedral of Iquique. When the victims' parents returned home, they wondered if they could have done more. Amid pain and poverty, they had made enormous efforts to find their children alive. They had shown the country what it means to fight for those you loves, and they taught the nation to listen to the cries of the suffering with more sensitivity and understanding. Psychiatrists, psychologists, and forensic experts questioned why Perez Silva had committed such brutal crimes. Perez Silva himself could not explain it. Julio was a serious man, quiet and even withdrawn, obsessed with cleanliness. At first glance, he seemed friendly, but he never had any friends. Julio Segundo Perez Silva was born on July 15, 1963, in Puchuncaví, in the Valparaíso region of Chile. His former classmates and teachers remembered him as a quiet and calm child. Due to his family's modest financial situation, he was forced to attend school in rubber sandals and without a uniform, which made him the target of constant teasing. Perez Silva's father was an extremely violent man who regularly beat his son and wife. From an early age, Julio was used to being afraid of his father. At the age of 7, Julio fainted for the first time when his father slammed his head against a wall after Julio had entered the room without asking permission. After that, he tried to avoid his father whenever possible. According to Perez Silva, he was molested by an older boy at the age of 11, but he kept it a secret because he felt extremely ashamed. As a teenager, the future criminal dropped out of school due to poor academic performance and lost interest in studying. From the few memories of those who knew him, Perez Silva's favorite childhood hobby was playing soccer. He regularly participated in neighborhood tournaments and was quite talented with the ball. But as soon as the games ended, he would shower, get dressed, and leave without speaking to anyone. At the age of 22, Julio married, and soon the newlyweds had 2 daughters. Unfortunately, the marriage did not last long. Perez Silva then met another woman who also had 2 young daughters. Those around him said he was an excellent husband and treated the children as if they were his own. He worked regularly and was a friendly neighbor. However, rumors of an alleged attempted rape of one of the girls also ended this relationship. Julio then moved to the northern city of Iquique to start a new life. A few weeks after his move, he met Nancy Boero, an older woman with 6 daughters. Together, they moved to Alto, Hospicio, where they later settled in a small, modest house. In mid-1998, Nancy managed to sell a small piece of land in Iquique and used the proceeds to buy Julio a used car and pay for driving lessons. At that time, Perez Silva worked as a laborer loading salt bags and earned very little. The financial situation became increasingly difficult, so Julio decided to earn extra money as an unlicensed taxi driver. Around the same time, a series of disappearances began in the region. Some of Perez Silva's neighbors recalled that he was always vacuuming and cleaning the inside of his car, but they did not think much of it. According to Julio, his first crime was committed without any plan. He claimed he had met an underage girl who agreed to engage in intimate relations with him for money. When they reached a secluded beach, he allegedly realized that his companion had no intention of doing anything and only wanted to steal the money from his glove compartment. In a fit of rage, Perez Silva attacked the girl, hitting her in the face with a rock until she died. A gold medal with the emblem of a soccer team, which Perez Silva's partner had given him, was found at the crime scene. Unfortunately, this information only came to light after the case became widely known. The police officer working at the scene simply took the medal, assuming it had no connection to the crime. This action further highlighted the low level of training among some police officers involved in the case. Thanks to his car, Perez Silva could move freely around different parts of the city, offering rides to teenage girls. He targeted young girls who agreed to get into his car under the pretext that he would give them a ride along the desolate streets of Alto Hospicio. After several psychiatric and psychological evaluations, it was determined that Julio Perez Silva suffered from antisocial disorder and displayed severe antisocial behavior that prevented him from forming emotional connections with others. Despite this diagnosis, Perez Silva seemed outwardly friendly. He was sometimes able to hold conversations with those he met. His partner, Nancy, for example, claimed that he was loving, open, and attentive in their relationship, giving her massages and even bringing her breakfast in bed. She also said he had never been aggressive. The only strange behavior Nancy noticed was catching Julio several times staring nervously and excitedly at other women. As the investigation continued, more bodies of missing girls and women who had disappeared between April of 1999 and August of 2001 in the Alto Hospicio area were found. However, Perez Silva denied knowing anything about them. On February 26, 2004, Julio Segundo Perez Silva was found guilty of 14 murders and 1 attempted murder. Throughout the entire trial, the defendant expressed no remorse and never apologized to the families of his victims. He maintained his innocence, claiming that police officers had framed him and coerced him into confessing. Perez Silva stated that on the day of his arrest, he had been beaten and tortured by police until he could no longer bear the pain and decided to accept the accusations against him. Given such serious claims, the authorities assumed Perez Silva had lost his mind and was simply lying. However, it was clear that some people remained unconvinced. Soon, various rumors began circulating in the country's media. One of the darkest rumors surrounding the case was that Barbara, the only surviving victim, had been involved in a romantic relationship with Julio and had helped him lure other girls into his car. The families of the victims refused to believe this and publicly expressed their trust and support for Barbara. Reports suggest that Barbara was never able to finish high school. As a result, she eventually left the city and was said to have lived in poverty on the streets. Julio Sexundo Perez Silva was initially incarcerated at the Alto Hospicio prison, but was later moved to solitary confinement in a high-security prison in the Santiago metropolitan region. 4 guards monitor his every move around the clock to prevent him from committing suicide, which he had attempted several times. Despite his unpredictable behavior, Perez Silva occasionally behaves well, listening to music, watching movies, making crafts, and playing soccer with prison staff a few times a month. He has never been placed in the general prison population, as it would be impossible for him to survive there. Other inmates had already sworn to kill him at the first opportunity. The families of the victims have yet to receive a proper apology from the authorities. President Ricardo Lagos granted them modest houses of barely more than 50 square meters and what many considered laughable lifetime payments of around $200 as compensation. Thank you for watching, and take care.